Proceeding to the edge of the cliff, we stand at a point on the English coast interesting to every American, for there, just below, was enacted a stirring episode in the history of his country on September 22nd, 1779. The rich sheaves of golden grain stood in the fields, and the farmers had been busy all the day hurrying in their harvest. The jolly waggoners whistled and sung their jocund songs, but ever and anon a mysterious rumbling fell on their ears. The rustics looked up at the clear autumn sky and wondered to hear, as they imagined, thunder at this time of the year. Evening came on, and the moon rose in its splendour, lighting up and silvering the waves as they beat and rolled against the white cliffs. The farmers, taking advantage of the evening moon, kept on their leading, and all seemed peace. Suddenly, however, all was horror and discord. A heavy peal of artillery burst forth and reverberated through the caves and hollows of the cliffs. The astonished harvesters ran towards the bank and gazed in horror at the scene before them. Columns of shining smoke uprose, and flashes of flame were thrust through their folds like the quivering hands of a martyr. 6 vessels in deadly engagement, the celebrated Paul Jones, or Jean Paul, whose name was a terror on the coast, had fallen in with a convoy of the Baltic fleet, which had been for some days sheltering under the protection of Scarborough Castle. Events of the preceding day, which will be related hereafter, caused Captain Pearson with his convoy to proceed round the head. Immediately on entering Bridlington Bay, he descried his enemy. The squadron ran as close as possible to the shore, then tracked round the head, and the action commenced. The vessels under the command of Paul Jones were the Bonhomme Richard and the Alliance, each of 40 guns, the Pallas of 32 guns, and the Vengeance of 12 guns. The convoy consisted of the Serapis of 44 guns, Captain Pearson and the Countess of Scarborough of 22 guns. Captain Piercy, 3 hours this deadly conflict raged. The night was calm and serene, the moon in full splendour. The Countess of Scarborough and the Pallas fought each other fiercely for 2 hours, when the former surrendered. Volley after volley thundered, and frequently the cannonballs, missing their mark, spent their fury on the chalk cliffs, detaching ponderous blocks which rolled below, scaring the seafowl. The villagers, who had assembled in scores, now advanced, now retreated, upsetting the sheaves of corn, scaring and raising the whirring partridges and lapwings, which rent the air with their wails. About 8:30 the Serapis and the Richard came to close quarters and grappled with each other stern and stern. The magazine of the Serapis blew up, and the ship being on fire, communicated the flames to Jones' vessel. The fire was with difficulty subdued, and the mainmast of the Serapis went by the board, when Captain Pearson called for quarter. The conflict raged till 11 p.m, and all throughout the Alliance, shifting about, raked the deck of the Serapis. During these tactics, the commander of the Alliance made a fearful mistake, and fired a volley into the broadside of the Richard. How terrible the carnage was may be gathered from the fact that, out of a crew of 365, the Richard had only 68 left alive. So crippled and shattered was she that, with dead and dying, she sank on the following day. Jones took charge of the Serapis, rigged jurymasts, hoisted the American flag, and wandered about the North Sea for 14 days, and at last arrived at Texel with his prize, if a shattered and crippled ship could be so called. Such was the engagement between the ships of 2 nations, both speaking the same language, and both fighting against what they considered an enemy. This affair spread consternation along the Yorkshire coast, and for weeks after the fishermen of Flamborough put cautiously to sea. The coast for miles was strewn with casks, cordage, planks and spars, relics of the fray. The bonny lasses of Flamborough, as they skipped from rock to rock in quest of bait, stopped short in their merry laugh or blithesome song as they saw before them the mangled, bruised and sodden body of some poor fellow who fell in this action, and, having been tossed about for weeks, at last rested on these rocks.